explanation or
You can make a, oh,
what's that?
she was just starting the recorder. So yeah, you can make a
I would
motion.
like to make a motion that Rex be the chair for this meeting.
I think we've got our other member here. This has been good.
Yeah.
I've been, how are you? You're not late by much, Ben.
There's no
So-
time for traffic this time of day.
So we, Ben, we don't have our voted on board chair or vice chair tonight. So we just need to appoint someone temporary for the evening only. And Neil's made a motion,
I'll second the motion.
second by Jeanette. Is there any other discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Now. I mean, that controls it. Okay. With that, Jeanette, will you stand and get that cramp out of your leg and lead us to the Pledge of Allegiance? Thanks, Jeanette. Okay. Now that we have Ben here, we're going to, the first thing we want to do is review our minutes from our last meeting of April 25th of 24. Present them for approvals, or everyone had a chance, well, those that were here, which consists of myself. I've gone through them and I could not see anything that that needed adjustment on it.
It was fine to me. I thought they looked good.
Rick, have you noticed anything here that went from the presentation?
No, it looks like it follows what had happened in the meeting, and you can just do a roll call vote. You don't have to do a roll call vote, just a voice.
Was this
Do we need a motion to approve them, or are they just approved?
all in, just all in favor?
Just all in favor, easy.
All in favor of approving the minutes?
Aye.
Aye, and aye. Thank you. Okay, we tonight got a little bit of training first. At a current, I'm looking at the last meeting. Does yours actually say it? Yeah, that. Oh, well.
No,
this is. The reason why is because we have two new members to the Board of Adjustment, and it would be an opportunity, well, for all of us to refresh, go over the legal requirements of what's required for a variance, because that's what you're going to be hearing tonight. We thought that would be helpful for our two new members.
So Chris, you want to take the training?
Yes. And the challenge is I forgot my reading glasses, so I'm going to try to read my statute from here. But variances, there's two things that the Board of Adjustment hears. One is going to be variances, and the other one will be appeals. And so we have maybe 2 or 3 appeals a year, but that's something you will be hearing in the future. But tonight is a variance, and a variance is an exception to our code. It's an application to modify the code, to grant an exception to a particular requirement. They are not the normal, they're the exception to the rule. So usually variances are difficult to obtain. There are 5 requirements that each one of them have to be satisfied. And so I'm going to go over each of those requirements with you, and just keep this in mind as you go over and you hear the presentation and you hear from the applicant. And if you have any questions during the presentation regarding any of these requirements, please feel free to ask me any questions. But all 5 of these things have to be found. So the first one is that literal enforcement of the ordinance would cause an unreasonable hardship for the applicant that is not necessary to carry out the general purpose of the land use ordinance. Now, the statute goes on and provides some further clarification as to what you can consider as an unreasonable hardship. So in determining whether or not land use ordinance would cause, enforcement of land use ordinance would cause unreasonable hardship, the appeal authority may not find an unreasonable hardship if the hardship is self-imposed or economic. Let's see. And it also has to be related to characteristics that are related to the land in particular. That's going to be a critical focus, is it has to relate to some special circumstances of the land. So that's the second requirement. There are special circumstances attached to the property that do not generally apply to other properties in the same zone. And let's In determining whether or not there are any special circumstances attached to the property, the appeal authority may find that special circumstances exist only if the special circumstances relate to the hardship complained of and deprive the property of privileges granted to other properties in the same area. And so you're going to be looking at the property specifically in particular and comparing it to other properties and land use rights that other properties in the area are able to enjoy. The third one is granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of the substantial property right possessed by other properties in the same area. The fourth one is the variance will not substantially affect the general plan and will not be contrary to the public interest. And 5, finally, the spirit of the land use ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. And so as you go through and make your motion and you hear the presentation, if you decide to approve, I would ask that in your motion, you would at least state that all 5 elements have been met and at least address them briefly. Again, if you decide not to grant the variance, you could, even if 4 of those applied, if you find that 1 does not apply, you are legally prohibited from granting that variance. And so all 5 have to be met. And that's variances in a nutshell. Are there any questions that you have?
So explain a little bit because I know this has come up numerous times, the self-imposed aspect of this.
So I recently sat in on a case in Roy as an ALJ for a variance, and they had put in a second driveway and also put in an RV pad in their front yard before even requesting a building permit. It was clearly against the code, and now they were asking for a variance because they had already built this, and so they had incurred some expense. So that's a self-imposed problem. It doesn't relate to a physical characteristic of the land, such as a slope, or there's like a river going right through the middle of the land, or there's trying to think of some other examples, but it has to be related to the land itself. So it can't be something that they've added to the land and done themselves. And plus, and also, you can't support a variance by saying this is going to cost me so much money to alter my plans and come up with a different alternative. That the law doesn't allow you to consider a financial hardship.
So there's also a component of this, one of your 5, is that you want to be able to consider what similar properties have been granted in the past. And how do you justify that? Say a subject property has easements through it, it's smaller in size, has greater slope. It's hard to compare those things to be able to grant or consider that.
If the properties are so different from the other ones that are surrounding it, so because of the restrictions. So the way I've interpreted that, say it's like if you want to build a home, I mean that's a substantial property right that people get to enjoy. And so if other areas throughout that area that you're looking at are able to build homes, that would be as long as they identify that it's a proper use that they want to apply to that land, it's not prohibited. Others are enjoying that type of right. Then I think you would would satisfy it. It would come down again to the physical characteristics. Would that justify, could you come up with a different alternative where you reduce setbacks, or you position things differently, or you come up with a different design that, even though it would still be not technically in compliance with the ordinance or the code, it would allow them to go and enjoy that property right like other individuals in the area. I don't know. Is that okay? Does that answer your question?
Other questions for our council, Crisco? New members, you understand what he just went through?
Like a checklist, it's pretty straightforward.
And even during a variance hearing, it's all right to refer to legal counsel if we have a question about a specific one of those 5. Is that correct?
Yes, and on those 5, you're also, if you have specific factual questions, you can direct questions. I mean, you'd go through the chair, but direct questions to staff or to Rick, or planning staff, or any of those.
All right, thank you. Felix, you want to take over?
Yes. Good evening and welcome to our 2 new members, Marshall and McGonigal and Ben Peterson. A warm welcome. So I'll just start in with a quick intro. This is a request to a variance to the minimum yard setbacks. And so in this particular area, you can see what I have up on the map. This is up on Old Snow Basin Road, and kind of winds up, and then you get to this point right at the top, right about the ridge line, and then this is where the lot is situated, and kind of a unique place, a pretty special place because you have views on both sides. Obviously, a very very sought after place to build, and then you also have some a lot of outdoor activities and kind of a forest setting in this area. And so the zoning in this particular area is Forest Valley 3. And the Forest Valley 3 zone, it has those minimum yard setbacks. Just any property that wishes to build in this zone needs to abide by those minimum yard setbacks for the structures. And in this case, a home, the minimum yard setbacks for a home would be 30 feet on the front, 30 feet on the rear, and then 20 on both sides. And what the applicant is looking to do is to maximize the area on this property. And the request is this: an 8-foot variance to the front yard setback, which would bring that setback down to 22 feet. And then a 10-foot variance on the west side. So it would bring that house a little closer to the west side, about equating to basically a 10-foot side yard setback on the west, and a 5-foot variance. So that would be a 15-foot setback on the east, and then a 10-foot setback on the rear. So that's pretty clear what the applicant is looking for. And in here, just running through some of the criteria that must be met with the variance request. So the Board of Adjustment does have the ability to grant variances if they find that all those criteria are met. And so we'll just quickly walk through some of those in these slides. And these criteria are also in your staff reports. And so you can easily, go through there and make some notes and highlight some things if you wish. And so this one here, literal enforcement of the setbacks in particular would cause an unreasonable hardship. So can the board find that it would? And then also in determining whether enforcement of the land use ordinance would cause an unreasonable hardship, again, the authority may not find an unreasonable hardship if the hardship is self-imposed or economic. And the second one here, there are special circumstances attached to the property that do not generally apply to other properties in the area. And so, and then here, granting a variance is essential to the enjoyment of the substantial property rights. And then also granting a variance will not substantially affect the general plan and will not be contrary to the public interest. And that the spirit of the land use ordinance is observed and substantial justice is done. Here's a site plan that was provided by the applicant. There were several others, but I thought this would be helpful to kind of visualize the intended way that the builder would like to maximize this area. And you can see this driveway planned in with some trees, and also that house edged right up close to the road and up to the side yard setbacks. And here you also have a survey that was provided by the applicant. This one shows some of the contours. It helps just kind of show the slopes. And then also the dimensions of the property. And just a little more general information about the property characteristics would be that the total acreage, I believe it's 0.65. Is that correct, of 0.65? Because I was getting some conflicting. Is it 0.57 the acreage? Okay. Okay. And so let's see here. Staff did not provide a recommendation for this. I think it's probably best to maybe just lay out the facts, lay out the details. Mr. Tyler McHugh is here. He's with Magleby Construction, and I think he could also provide some light into the plans to build on this property. And I think that pretty much concludes what I would like to share. Any questions for me or?
Do I understand correctly that lot was created prior to the current zoning being established?
That's right. Yes, which explains why it's such a small lot in a 3-acre zoning area. It is a grandfathered property. As it is, yep.
And throughout the report, I see 0.75, but now the applicant's saying 0.57.
Yeah, and that, I mean,
I even saw some discrepancy of the survey. Is that the difference perhaps?
yes, that's right. I wasn't quite clear on the exact acreage. And I would hope it could, because the survey that was provided didn't really show the acreage.
Could you come to the microphone if that's okay, Chair?
Yeah.
And state your name?
Just Felix, do you have anything else that you want to present
No,
before
that
we
pretty
have the
much wraps
applicant?
up what I had to say.
Okay, thank you. So did the board have any other questions for Felix before we turn?
Felix, could you explain to the board just a little bit about why the setbacks are what they are? Why is it important to have 30 feet in the front and the back and 20 on the sides? Just give us a little background about that.
What it does is it really helps to kind of shape the look of the neighborhood. And it also, especially in some of these rural areas where people move out to these rural areas expecting to have a little bit more space, which it largely explains why the side yard setbacks are quite a bit larger. In some of these forest areas, the minimum lot sizes are much larger, as well as the setbacks for these. In this case, it's more indicative of like a residential type development in a forest setting, which explains that increased side yard setback.
And is the rear 20 normally? Is it 20 normally or 30?
The side yard setback is 20. That's
20 on
zone.
the side,
That's
and then the
minimum.
rear.
The rear is 30, but in typical residential zones, that can be reduced to 15. If they've got a two-car attached garage, is that?
Yeah, I mean, in residential areas where you have much smaller lots, you can find side yard setbacks down to 10, even 8 feet. Yeah.
So that's typical of a residential building.
Yes.
So in the county areas where it is a 3 acre, are these setbacks typical?
Yes, so for example, agricultural valley, 3 acre zoning, that one is your minimum side yard is 10 on one side and then 14 on the other. And that's similar, that's what you'll usually find in the ag zones.
So the forest has a little bit more
Yeah, it does indeed.
setback. Okay.
And just to clarify, the front and the rear setbacks are typically 30 in that same zone.
That's right. Yes.
Okay, any other questions from the board for Felix? Okay, we invite the applicant to come up and state your name and address and share your thoughts. And you about had one ready there.
Thank you. Thank you so much for taking the time to come out here. My name is Tyler McHugh. Our company, I'm a representative for Magleby Construction, and our address is 1291 West Center Street, Linden, Utah. We have been working with the client to determine the setbacks so that we can build the home that he would like to build. And ultimately what it came down to was when he purchased the land, these setbacks were already approved by the previous owner. And then there's an 18-month period where it's valid. And so it lapsed. And so ultimately, we're just asking for the same variances that were already approved to be approved again so that we can continue to build the project. His intention was to build a land with those build on the land with those setbacks. But this kind of puts a wrench in his project overall. He can't continue with the architectural design and drawings until we know whether or not this will be approved. So that's why we're here today. One thing I forgot to submit is if you look at that Sundance Ridge subdivision that surrounds it. So this lot was already established before Sundance Ridge subdivision was built in, and they built the entry to that subdivision right at the edge of where that moon crest is. Right at the top of that crest is where the entrance to that subdivision comes in.
You can kind of see it. There's an arrow pointing to it there, even on the map. Well, we could see it.
Right there, yeah, exactly. And if you look, those lots all are 3+ acre lots. And the building areas, the building envelopes for each one of those homes on that lot, the smallest one is 23,000 square feet. And so our client currently, with the setbacks in place, he could build a home for 9,000 square feet. What we're asking with these variances 11,000 square feet. And then with the variances being adjusted, he could build a 19,000 square foot home. So it's not anything larger than the subdivision adjacent to it, if that makes sense.
So as a clarification, without any variance, the building envelope is 11,000 square feet.
Yes.
Does that jive with your numbers, Felix?
By that.
Okay. And with the variances, it would now be 19,000
Square feet.
square feet. Yeah. And, okay, sorry, I just want to clarify. Go on.
Ultimately, that's all I really came here to say.
One clarification I just want to share with the board. The original approval on this had a west variance of 10 feet, and now it's been requested 14 feet. So it's not the same.
I think the misconception where on our end, this is our fault, was the previous, they were asking for a foot. How do I explain this? You have that email. Right. So this was our fault on our end. So the original setbacks that were asked for was 8 feet. So if you take the 30 feet, subtract the 8, you get the 22. If you, on the west side, they requested a 10-foot variance as well. So if you take the 10 feet, subtract from the 20, you have a 10-foot setback on the west side. So the setbacks that we're requesting are on the north side, on the very top. We're asking for a 20-foot, 22-foot setback. On the west side, a 10-foot setback. And on the east side, a 15-foot setback. And then on the south side, a 20-foot setback. So we're taking that rear from 30 to 20, which from what Felix was saying, sounds like it's very similar to what has been approved in the general area.
Finish those 30 to 20. What's your others?
South side goes from 30 to 20. The east side goes from 20 feet to 15 feet.
In the front?
The north side goes from 30 to 22 feet. And the west side from 20 to 10 feet.
So Tyler, you're representing the owner tonight, is that correct? Or is the owner here?
He is not here.
Okay.
I am representing him. Yes,
All right,
sir.
thank you. Questions for Tyler representing the owner of the property?
I guess I do have a question. Would other building plans fit the lot better? Or,
Could you,
I mean, like, if they build a smaller home, it would fit without variances, so
correct. So the,
they want to fit with the neighborhood and have the bigger homes so that it'd be like the other homes in the area. Is that,
when he bought the home, he bought it with those variances already approved. And so he started this plan and built we had the architect in place and we were building a project already currently with those variances, but it passed that 18-month mark. And so we're back to the drawing board again. So if we have to, we would have to readjust that.
Rick, as a clarification, how long ago was this prior variance approved?
It was back in 20, it's on the front page of the report. Yeah, October 22nd, 2020.
So it was during COVID. I remember this when it was during COVID when we were meeting virtually.
Correct.
I was actually on my cell phone. I remember this.
Yep.
This one when it came about. So depending on the land, you're saying 0.57. 0.57 is 24,795 square feet. That's the total land of that, not counting any setbacks. And if we look at 3/4 of an acre, it's 32,670. And you're trying to increase the building envelope from 11,000 to 19,000 on based on your own information, a 24,795 square foot piece of land.
Correct.
Is there anything excessive about this that seems excessive to anybody?
it seems like a really
There
big
we
house
go.
for a small
Question.
lot.
I have a question. There we go. Good time.
Is there a precedent for approving variance where it has been approved previously?
If it's a different owner and it's expired, we're doing a brand new application. So you're not going to be bound by the previous decision. Certainly you can look at the reasons why the Board of Adjustment issued a variance back in 2020 and see what the justifications were. I don't know if we have access to those minutes or not. And we could present that to the board. As far as precedents for, similar applications, I've seen houses need to be adjusted as far as plans. I've seen it granted. I've seen it go a number of ways. It's really case by case specific. So you're not going to be bound by any other decision, the one that was done for this particular property or really any other variance.
So the one troubling from your training tonight, the one troubling aspect is this, does this property owner have the same opportunity to enjoy the rights to his property as others or surrounding others? And yet we have no comparable because 0.57 is not anywhere near these 3-acre lots or bigger.
Yeah.
So from legal's perspective, it feels like we're trying to squeeze a 3 acre size home onto a 0.57 acre and being requested to grant that under the thought of comparable to other surrounding properties that they've enjoyed, but they enjoy a bigger lot. How do we-
Yeah, and I don't know if I mean, under the law, I don't know if you're allowed to have a certain size of home and, if it has to be exactly the same size as others. Or is it just having a home on the property that is satisfying that you're able to still enjoy the same rights by having a home? You just don't get as big of a home. This particular part, it's interesting. I mean, it was a grandfather it was a buildable grandfathered parcel, so the shape is very unique, and it's so just different than the size of any other in that zone, just by how it was created.
I'm not quite sure how, do I raise a hand or how do I, if I have?
Oh, you can
question?
just
Okay.
continue.
Do we have access to the notes from the previous approval as to why they,
She's
Yeah.
just.
Oh,
pulled the minutes up.
is this the previous approval that was done and why they decided to approve the variance?
Yes.
Scroll that up more, Felix. Drop down.
It looks like this might be the month before, and so, but it related to it, but there might be some additional minutes after this and from.
So it doesn't look like we actually,
That meeting was
I think
tabled.
the initial meeting was tabled and then it. Second, Felix, I wanted to see who was there.
That's when the minutes were approved, so it'd be the next Board of Adjustment meeting. This was the one on the 8th.
You there?
Felix, the next one would probably be in the first meeting of 2021. That's probably when they approve the October 22nd meet.
Yeah.
Scroll all the way to the bottom. So it's right there.
I want to share a perspective. Neil, you were on that phone call. as
I
well.
think I was sitting on my front
I-
porch with my phone as well.
I was on my phone. I found this probably in my 12 plus years of being on this board, the most frustrating meeting I had because my phone was dying. I had nothing in front of me. I didn't have a packet. I had nothing in front of me to look at. And we had one member of the three of us that felt very strongly about property rights. And it didn't matter that this lot was a lot smaller than surrounding lots and they should be able to do what they want. And I got beat down. And the director and I had a discussion after that. I remember it vividly. My frustration was we didn't have near the detail we've got tonight. Felix, it's nice to have the presentation. It's nice to see it. I'm not big on these virtual things. And so I would be the first to say, I don't feel, even though I was part of that approving last time, I don't feel any obligation to that approval or tie to it. I think we're looking at this fresh, and that's the way we need to, fresh eyes. Chris, do you agree?
I would agree with you. We have a completely different board composition. This is a separate application, new owners. You could consider, each individual member could consider the minutes and take them for what they feel they're worth and vote accordingly to how you interpret the matter and apply the law.
Okay. Does anybody have, before the board discusses, do you have any questions about our board for our builder Tyler representing the owner?
Just to address the first item on the 5 requirements that we have to approve a variance, what is the unreasonable hardship that is incurred by the owner by building a smaller home? Or could this be built? I'm just trying to follow my instructions. But
No worries. The hardship came from the subdivision after. So when those acre lots came in, one, it encroached right on the lot. And then two, the hardships that are there are that they can't enjoy their property the same as their opposing neighbors. And that's basically where we came through with on that. But to be honest, I'm not too familiar with variances too, so.
So Felix here. So what I did is I took the applicant's narrative and then I just added those notes. So in the page 2 of the report, you can see it says the list below are points taken from the applicant's narrative. And so A through E is, I guess, their description of why they think it's appropriate.
thanks.
Okay, if we're done with Tyler, Recognize.
Ryan
Mr.
Harmon, also with Magleby Construction,
Okay.
representing the owner of the property as well. I think another point with the undue hardship is when the client initially purchased the property, those variances were in place. And so he purchased it with that intent. Due to life circumstances and things, he hasn't been able to build as quick as he wanted to. So that's one of the elements that I like to bring up. The other is, in addition to that, there's been a lot of talk around the potential size of the home, and maybe building a smaller home and those things, being held to a variance that's that of a 3+ acre property. We've also discussed variances tonight of what a much smaller typical residential would be, which would be closer to 20 in the front, 20 in the back, 15 on the sides, if I remember correctly. So I would also ask that you take that into consideration as you're discussing and you're looking at it, that, this is a smaller property. So maybe we should look at, some of those variances that a typical property is. You'd mentioned earlier, what would the variances be on a smaller half-acre lot versus a 3-acre?
My reference was not a smaller, it was agricultural 3-acre lots to Felix, what those setbacks were. That's what he was addressing, not smaller.
Right, but this is a smaller one. This
This
is a
definitely is.
0.57 acre lot versus a 3-acre lot. And typical residential lots, I think Jeanette brought up that it's 15 and 15 on the sides and 20 in the back and the front on a typical residential lot. So the constraints that are being put on this smaller acreage is that of a 3-acre versus a typical residential. And so I just ask that you consider that as well.
Are there restrictions that you're running into from an architectural standpoint that don't allow? I understand the lot is a little uniquely shaped. Maybe there's a hallway that's not, you can't, is there any architectural things that you've ran into that are causing an undue hardship for the design? of the
I
home?
think really just that triangle shape makes it difficult with that given building envelope, constricting the entire lot as much as we are down to that smaller building envelope. So
When was the property purchased by the current owner?
2021, I believe. Not positive on that, but
So in order to be grandfathered into that previous approval, we would have had to have building permits within 18 months of that approval. So that would have been April of 2020, 2021 or 2022. They would have had some time.
there has been, when was the previous approval?
October 2020. Well, 18 months would be a year and a half, so it'd be April 2022. So I think, economically, maybe he couldn't afford it at that time, but at the same time, he had time to file for a building permit in that time period.
And I'm not positive on those dates of when the transaction happened versus when the last approval took place. So
And then just lastly, and I'll reemphasize this, the original, which we shouldn't even be considering, had a 10-foot variance on the west side. Now the new is 14-foot on the west side. It's an additional 3,000 square feet of request. So this isn't the same, even if we were to consider it the same. It is different. So, but we're not really comparing it to the Apple because that expired. Past approval. Hey, do you have anything else to represent
Nope,
the owner?
that
Okay,
covers.
thank you. Do we have anyone here that would like to speak in opposition to this variance or in favor of it?
Just, Chair, if you don't mind, these aren't, and it is completely up to your discretion as to whether you want to take public comment or not. Since this is an administrative type application, it's not required. But if you feel like it would be useful to especially go into the element if it's contrary to the public interest, you're more than welcome to, but it's not required.
Is there anyone who would like to speak on the contrary side of this? Okay, thank you. Okay, board. We can just discuss this internally here. I guess one of my thoughts is, I don't know, when you're trying to build a big house on a small footprint, is it self-imposed hardship?
That's
Which-
what I'm thinking.
Which Mr.
Yeah.
Crockett explained, that's one of the 5, if it's self-imposed, and duty to not approve.
I have a question. Is there anybody, or what's the feeling of the neighbors? I mean, would they? And I know you were here last time, so I would love to hear from you if you would mind speaking, but you don't have to.
Would you like to come up to the podium? Because I want to hear I want to hear, and I want your name on record. And believe me, as a board, we worry about precedences as well.
Well, I'm not a public speaker, so I'm very nervous to stand in front of a mic. But my name is Denise Green, and I live at 5580 Snow Basin Road, which is just down around the corner from where this is happening. And one of my concerns is just what I stated, that if you allow this to happen, then it can happen again and again and again. But also, one of my concerns is water is very scarce where we live. I am on a well, my 3rd well, because 2 went dry. My well right now produces 2 to 3 gallons a minute. So my concern is these great big mansions that are holding lots of people are using lots and lots of water. This is up above me, and I feel like it could impact me and my livelihood in my home that I have lived in since 1996. So those are my thoughts.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you for your comment.
Chair, when it comes to precedent, there wouldn't be a legal precedent, but I certainly respect and acknowledge that there is a public policy precedent that can also be put pressure on the board, even though it's not a strict legal precedent.
We've had so many up at Summit or at Powder Mountain that because of one, and then the next one
Correct.
says, well, I want to enjoy the same opportunity as the last one. Well, the last one was because we approved it. So I
Right.
think precedent does play a factor.
It does, and it's one where it's like remembering that these are exceptions. If we were going to open it up and just make it available for everyone, we would deliberately modify our ordinance.
Discussion by each. Jeanette, you want?
I can understand there are some hardships with the size of the lot and shape of the lot and the slope. But at the same time, I think it's a lot of house for that size of lot. I think the house could be reduced in size and not need that much of a setback. And the building plans are kind of weird anyway. It looks to me like they could be more normal. Kind of footprint.
Other thoughts? As far as the 5 areas, are there any of the 5 that really trouble you?
Just the there was one, I can't just think of what it was. I was thinking of it a minute ago, but I can't remember it.
There's one here, granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of substantial property right. I don't know that substantial means I'm gonna use Miss Green's comment, a mansion. Would a smaller, I mean, we're already, without any variances, there's 11,000 square foot footprint on a 0.57 acre lot. Seems pretty big on that small of a lot.
And I think also the word essential is important to look at. Whereas if you were looking at a piece of land, for example, where it was so constricted, you can't build a home on it at all, as opposed to having where you can build a home. It's just a question of size.
No, I agree completely. And to me,
So
if
in
you
that,
got
in that
11,000
vein, it feels like it's a self-imposed hardship.
Yeah. if you got 11,000 square foot footprint without any variances. And I get troubled when I see variances on all four corners. We've done a few where it's a back variance by a few feet. There's power lines, there's easements, and worked with that. A four-corner variance, four-sided variance is.
It's a lot.
Neil, you were part of this
Yeah.
the last time, and
Oh, this is a hard one for me because I like to see a property owner be able to use their property. So literal enforcement, does it cause unreasonable hardship? It is an unusual piece of property, and they've had that right to build there for 60 years. And I'm very sympathetic to the lady that spoke as well, but I don't know whether a smaller home is going to use less water. It probably will, but they could. Who gets to determine how much water they use? Because I mean, I deal with water every day. That's my business. And if somebody's drilling next to me, it directly affects me. And that's not part of what we're supposed to discuss, but yet it's a valid concern. Are they allowed to build that size of a home, and where does the water come from? It's just a rabbit hole I would like to some
there's
answer.
probably a Weaver Basin exchange. It would grant a certain amount of water. Sometimes they vary based on the size of the lot. Not on the size of the house, but the size of the lot.
So
But that's not our area.
yeah, it is not our area. So though I'm sympathetic and I see the point, I don't know if we have the right to say this house is too big or too small if it's similar to the homes in the area. So special circumstances, there are special circumstances. It's that triangle piece, when you squeeze it in, it just you lose the ability to build. Other people, and let's see, granting it is essential to the enjoyment of substantial property right by others for other property in the same zone. I know that sometimes when somebody builds a nice house, another house and another house, and they put a little, double wide trailer in that same subdivision, it doesn't go over very well. So I could see, it's nice to have homes that fit. So, this, like I say, this is tearing me at all sides. I'm sympathetic to both of you. I don't know what to say.
I want to just, I don't know if you looked at this, but because we are a little bit considering the enjoyment of a property right possessed by other properties, are the other homes in the area larger than 11,000 square feet typically?
I didn't go to that extent to measure the houses in the area, but they are very nice homes in that area. And quite a few large, pretty considerable large homes. And there's also some homes that are, I don't know, maybe I guess you could say reasonable size homes that have been there for quite some time, but Yeah, there's a mix of housing.
Felix, from your standpoint, because I'm not familiar with the exact location of this, is this up on the top of a hill somewhat
It is actually on a ridge line.
on a ridge line?
Yep.
So are they restricted in height on this building
They would
footprint?
be, yes. So we would have to ensure that no portion of the structure is above 35, which that makes it unique because on other properties where you're not on a ridge line, we can average out the height. So some areas may exceed 35, but we average out to 35. But on a ridge line, pretty strict. Nothing, no portion of the structure is over 35.
And is that 35 from the top of the lot
Yeah, it would be
or the
finished
highest
grade.
point in the lot?
It'd be finished grade to the highest.
So if
ridge
you
line.
have a lot that's like this and you build a house down here, is it 35 feet to the, or is it 35 above the highest point on that lot?
Yes, so it would be 35 feet from the finished grade. And so if you're looking at height requirements on a ridge line, no portion of that building can exceed 35 feet at all. So
From
that's
the grade level?
from the finished grade, yep.
I needed your name tag. Person, Marshall, comments?
I mean, I'm having the same issue on the first. I'm just trying to determine, like, this to me feels like a self-imposed hardship. When the property was purchased, they should have done their due diligence. They knew when it expired. It shouldn't be new news. But now they're far outside of that building envelope. As far as on special circumstances, I don't see really any special circumstances as far as on the plan or you guys is drawn up. You guys have pretty much filled the whole lot with house, so there doesn't appear to be, any streams you're avoiding or any added retention that's going to be needed that would create any circumstances to why you couldn't build within the existing envelope. As far as again, granting the variance is essential to the enjoyment of substantial property right possessed by other properties in the same zone. Again, that's super, I just think subjective. Do you need to have a house covering the whole thing? Or because as far as your neighbors have the larger lots, probably because they prefer the open space. So that's what they are enjoying is open space, not the larger home. As far as on how it affects the general plan, you guys made in your own statement of the general plan indicates this area should be developed as planned and zoned. Right there, you're stating it does affect the general plan. But so I guess I don't have more thoughts on that.
What's your thoughts?
Well, first I'm new, so I'm just learning this process, but glad to be here. I'm also a builder. I'm very sympathetic to builders and the challenges that we face day to day, trying to make a win-win for everybody involved. I am questioning, as I read through these 5 points, the hardship that I see is that they purchased a lot possibly that had these zones already attached to them. So I don't know if it's a question for legal or I'm struggling with that point. Like, is this a hardship? They bought this lot. It had the zones already reduced. They were planning to build a home of that size. To me, that could be an argument for, yeah, that's a hardship for this, the new owner of this lot. Is there any comment or discussion around that?
I think the question would come down to, is it self-imposed? In doing the due diligence and the research, and knowing when it expired, could have action have been taken to avoid this? It's kind of separate from the land itself, that particular type thing.
So I apologize. I didn't quite catch. How long did they have from the time they purchased the lot till the expiration of the variance?
From October 2020, if the code is 18 months, it'd be from then. So, but I don't know the date that they purchased.
Do we know when you purchased the lot based on when the thing expired? Because I know that, if they purchased the lot, by the time you draw a set of plans and get through the process, it can take months. So I don't know if that's a hardship or not for them. It may not be
Well,
reasonable to.
And is the hardship going to be that it's going to be an economic loss or a burden because they're going to have to redesign the home? That wouldn't be allowed as a consideration.
Thank you. Anyway, I have similar feelings to Neil. I want property owners to be able to use their property. I'm very sympathetic to also the neighbor and don't know how we can determine how big someone's home can be on their property. I had a question about what is the square footage of a lot if we take the setbacks off? Does anybody know? Or is that a?
Well, the square foot of the lot's 24,795.
Right.
And if you just figure in the setbacks as the county now requires, it leaves you 11,000.
11,000.
According to that.
Okay, that's what that was answered. So they could build an 11,000 square foot home if they, as is, without an variance.
And
That's
sorry.
actually an 11,000 square foot footprint. The home could be 2 stories. I mean, you could have 22,000 if you went up 2 stories, as long as you don't exceed that 35-foot height.
I don't know how to proceed, but those are my questions.
No, those are all valid.
One comment that I have, if it's okay, Chair. And the stress, I don't have an opinion one way or the other. It's not my position. But when we say enjoy a property right, we have zoning codes that impact property rights all over the place. We cannot just go build whatever we want, wherever we want. And the law allows that, as long as it's not so restricted that it constitutes a taking, which would be constitutionally impermissible. But we have zones all over the place where you have acreage requirements, you've got different setbacks, and it still allows for the use of a property right. It doesn't run afoul of the law. So I just wanted to make that clarification, but also emphasize that I am neutral on this.
Director Grover, do you have any comments before we?
No, I really appreciate your deliberation on this, going back and forth. I think you could possibly construe it either way when you're looking at these requirements. And as you do so, I think it's important to bear in mind, like you are, the property owners' rights, but then also the residents in that area as well. And the impact that it could have on them. So, whatever happened in the past, that's expired. You're not, as legals indicated, you're not held to any of those requirements. You're looking at this as a fresh application. And how you proceed, I think you could possibly go either way on this one.
Thank you, Director.
And also, since we have 5 members here instead of 3, your vote does not have to be unanimous as long as it's just a majority.
So finally, and then I'll call for a motion. As chair, I feel there's a self-imposed aspect to this request. I also feel like regardless of the prior, this is not only a new request, but it's an additional request for 3,000 additional square feet. I'm troubled by that a little bit. So those are probably and I want to share the other thoughts. So I'm open to a motion, either in the affirmative or opposed. Motion.
I'll take a shot at it. I move that we deny the variance based on the findings that although it meets some of the criteria for required by state law, the self-imposed hardship is an issue in my mind based on the size of the home. I guess that's all.
Okay. So Jeanette's made a motion to deny based upon this does not meet all 5 of the criteria. Is there a second?
I second the motion.
Okay, so second. Discussion. before we call for a vote?
I just, for clarification, if they would like to modify their application, what's the process? Say they wanted just a front setback change, but leave everything else the same.
Let's do this. So we've got a motion and a second on the table. So first we need to call for a vote on that. And then depending on that outcome, then I think that's a valid question to address. So is there any questions as far as the motion that's been made and seconded?
I have a comment, but I don't know if I.
Discussion. You're
or
good.
is
This
it
is the
discussion?
time. This is the time.
I, having been in building, I do know how, from my perspective, almost sacred the setbacks are. Like, we can't, we can't touch them. Like, you just don't build outside your setbacks, and I've known that they're almost impossible to change. So just from a building perspective, I'm aware of that. Yeah, my thoughts just come back to the possible hardship of buying a lot, having it expire with the setbacks that were there. And maybe there wasn't reasonable time to get building permit in place. I don't have an answer to that question, so I don't quite know.
Okay.
So,
Any other discussion regarding the motion? We'll do a roll call vote on this. Jeanette?
Aye.
Aye is in voting
Favor of the
in
motion.
favor of the motion to
To deny.
deny. Okay, Neil?
Nay. Go against,
Opposed.
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 is there a aye, a nay, and I plead the fifth? How does this work?
Nope, it's a yeah, vote in favor of it or against it.
You mind if I clarify,
So
the committee, chair, I mean, I'm a board member, I'm sorry, my eye is McGonigal. Are you voting in favor of the motion or against the motion, or are you opposed to the issuance of a variance?
Voting in favor of the motion,
Okay.
opposed to the variance.
oh, I was confused what your
Okay.
motion, I thought you were opposed to the motion.
That's what I thought as well. So that's why I wanted to
Okay,
clarify
so
based off your comments.
I'll be more clear on this. If you're opposed, I mean, if you support the motion to deny, you would vote aye.
Correct.
So Jeanette,
Aye.
Neil,
Oppose.
I'm gonna go oppose.
okay, the chair votes aye. So that's
Three.
three in favor. So the motion to deny is carried. And I think that's it as far as our business right now. I know Neil had a question, which is hypothetical at this point.
Yes, and so what they would need to do on this situation is they would submit a new request and then it would come before you. And
So I think we should let them, I mean, if they were to ask for a variance for just one side setback but all four sides is a lot. And it's a lot of building on that size of home. Oh, that size of lot.
And I think as a board, historically, we've been open when there's been unique circumstances to a small variance here or there. Typically, it's not a variance. I had the percent here, and I know we're just talking now. This was a 23.5% variance to the total line. And that's when it was 3/4 of an acre. So this is probably close to 30% of that footprint variance.
Well, it leaves no open space for play area.
Yeah.
It's all house.
So, okay, the motion, the variance is denied. Is there any other business to take care? We have. sidebar. Let's wait. Director, do you have any comments as far as this?
no,
Legal, anything else, Chris?
I thought the discussion was absolutely fantastic. The way that you addressed each of the elements, the discussion back and forth. Our two new members, the questions and the analysis, in my opinion, were spot on. So thank you.
Thank you. And as chair for the evening, I also appreciate all of your comments. Great to have you all here, and it's nice to have a full board. tonight. So thank you. Motion to adjourn. Thanks. Was calling for it. But that's okay.
That was awesome.
Denise, is it Denise? Are you Denise Green from the Ogden Valley? For a long time ago? So I knew